Good morning, everybody. I'm Barbara Devini. I'm this year's coordinator for Credo, and we're happy to have with us today Mike Raible as our Credo presenter. He'll speak to us for about 15 to 20 minutes, followed by some Q&A. And if you're participating via Zoom, you can put your questions in the chat. Mike and his wife, the esteemed artist Patricia Raible, have been members of UUCC for over 15 years. He's served on the Buildings and Grounds team, and he plays guitar and sings with the UUCC house band. Mike, thank you for being with us this morning and sharing what you give your heart to.
Thank you. Let me start this way. There are the ones you call friends. They're the ones you call late at night. They're the ones you call family, and the ones that you hold close to your heart. As Barbara said, I'm Mike Raible, married to the abstract artist Patricia Steele Raible. This April we'll celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary. They said it wouldn't last. For those of you that were in the sermon today, I'm not sure who's the rock and who's the tree between Patricia and I. She probably has an opinion of that. But what I'd like to talk about today is family. And our connections, our family connections are both certainly by blood, by marriage, and by beliefs. When I was young, my grandmother, my mom's mom, died. And my grandfather, as time went on, went to an elementary school reunion and met a widow that he had known back in 5th grade. And they began dating. However, my family decided, in deference to my dead grandmother, that we would always refer to this woman as Mrs. Niehaus. And even though she showed up at all of our family gatherings, she was always called Mrs. Niehaus. Perhaps she would have preferred to be called something else, less formal. But my family never changed what they called her, although it was obvious that my grandmother held her very close to his heart. So reunions are kind of a strange thing. There are opportunities to reinvent yourself. There are opportunities to do things differently, to change history. And David Wilcox wrote about a reunion that he called Last Chance Waltz. I'm standing before my old high school. It's been years since I touched the door. But to heal the old pain, we must face it again. So I'll walk down those hallways once more. I've come to this reunion, for my heart is still a prisoner of war. And if I find it's all right, we're escaping tonight. That's what I came here for. So won't you please waltz with me? I feel like I'm just like I used to be. My heart is locked up here so quietly, believing that you hold the key. Won't you please waltz me free? Turns of our steps are untangling me, free from some dragged around memory and the rusty old rhythms of fear. And after these years, melting the shackles with fear. I'm nervous as if it's high school. You're happily married, I know. But it's not just this dance I'm asking you for. I'm asking you years ago. Remember I wrote in your yearbook, won't you please waste some time on me? There's just a few things I must tell you. That's as brave as I'll ever be. Please waltz with me. I feel like I'm just like I used to be. My heart is locked up here so quietly, believing that you hold the key. Please waltz me free. The turns of our steps are untangled and deep, free from some drag around memory and the rusty old rings of fear. And after these years, I'll melt in the shackles with tears. So that was his interpretation of reunions. But to continue the story, my Uncle Hank, who was my dad's brother, lost Aunt Alice. And again, the family decided that when he started to date Betty, that Betty was not to be called Aunt Betty. So for as long as I can remember, she was Betty and not Aunt Betty. Now, I'm sure she would have preferred to be called Aunt Betty, but that's not what the family decided. Now, my Uncle Jack lost his wife, Aunt Babe. Guess what the family decided? When he started dating Hilda, it wasn't Aunt Hilda, it was Hilda. That was it. Okay? So, what's the moral of that story? We could have decided that it was okay to show Betty or Hilda or Mrs. Niehaus that we cared about them, but we didn't. And I'm sure it hurt them, hurt my grandfather, hurt my uncles. So don't be afraid to reframe your decisions if the results are not what you anticipated. It won't hurt the children. That's supposedly why they made this decision was, oh, we don't want to hurt the children. Well, it wouldn't hurt the children. I'm sorry. So another family story. My father and I were estranged for the last few years of his life. And he had a heart attack and was in the hospital. And my mom was talking to me on the phone, and she asked if he wanted to speak to me. And from the hospital bed, he said, no. And that was the last word I heard from my father. So those connections are a little bit tough when you think about them. Cheryl Wheeler wrote a song called Since You've Been Gone about her father. And she doesn't sing it very often in concert because it still kind of hurts. But I will sing it for you. And it applies, as you will hear, applies to not just fathers, but other people that we have lost, certainly. And I almost started this in a lower key than I would have been able to sing it. And my age, sitting here crying, I ought to be stronger than I am. Ought to be taking comfort from wisdom or something like that. But it isn't that way. Sooner or later, I'm still that nervous ninth grader. Watching pull us together, I never knew how. And since you've been gone, I'm just falling apart. There's a hole in my life, in my soul, in my heart. And I stare out this window till light becomes dark. And there's nothing touching. To complain. We're just bereft, not deserted. Lord knows your rest was deserved. It's just your absence is present in all that I do. Sun on the field. In the moonlight, you say it. In the hymn, some church bells playing. Always been part of them, but I never knew. Since you've been gone, I'm just falling apart. There's a hole in my life, in my soul, in my heart. And I stare out this window till light becomes dark. There's nothing that's touching me. It feels like nothing is touching. How could I ever begin to say, surely you already since from you've gone away, how can this fine lady be true? Since you've been gone, I'm just falling apart. There's a hole in my life, in my soul, in my heart. And I stare out this window till light becomes dark. And there's nothing that's touching me. Since you've been gone, I'm just falling apart. There's a hole in my life, in my soul, in my heart. And I stare out this window till light becomes dark. And there's nothing that's touching. So, as Mary Chapin Carpenter tells us, time only goes one way. Age sometimes exacts a price, even on the living. Linda Ronstadt can no longer sing. Janice Ian, who I was with at Swananoa in July, can no longer sing. Her last album is up for a Grammy. And I would like to close with a song from that album. No, I'm gonna sing your own song. See these lines on my face, they're a map of where I've been. And the deeper they are traced, deeper life has settled in. How do we survive? Out of our lives. And I not trade a line, it's smooth and fine, or pretend that time stands still. I want to rest my soul where it can grow without fear. Another line, another year. I'm still standing here. See these marks on my skin, they're the lyric of my life. Every story I begin just means another end's in sight. Only lovers understand. Skin just covers who I am. Not trade a line, it's smooth and fine. Or pretend that time stands still. I want to rest my soul here where it can grow without fear. Another line, another year. I'm still standing here. See these bruises, see these scars, hieroglyphs that tell the tale. You can read them in the dark. Through your fingertips like braille. And I would not trade a line, make it smooth and fine, or pretend that time stands still. I want to rest my soul here where it can grow without fear. Another line, another year. I'm still standing here. I'm still standing here. I'm still standing here.
Wow, thank you for being so open and sharing your heart with us. For those who joined on Zoom, you can put any questions in the chat, but we're going to start with questions from the room. I know I have one. Who else has a question? Tom Moore.
I'd just like to say your music was very effective, and I'm really glad I attended today.
Thank you. Me too. Tom Cole.
Ditto, and thank you, Mike. Here's a quote that I heard would it kind of open up some doors into my understanding songs and songwriting. Songs are prayers. And I don't know, does that resonate? I mean, I could talk more about who said it and why, what it means to me, but just those three words, do they resonate with you at all, or?
Yeah, that resonates with me.
Okay.
Definitely does. It's a way to connect,
Yeah.
which is what prayer is all about.
Hopefully, yeah.
So my question is, when did you get started playing the guitar or any other instrument?
Mhm.
And what has it meant to you over your lifetime?
Okay. So family gathering, when I was 14, my cousin, brought her husband and he played guitar and taught me how to play, at that point, the streets of Laredo. And, so I bought a Sears Silvertone guitar, started playing, played through high school, played through college at coffee houses and various places like that.
So where'd you go to college and what did you study besides guitar?
University of Cincinnati, went into architecture. So after I left Cincinnati and went to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, the guitar sort of went away for a while. When I had a son, he said, I'd really like to learn how to play guitar. And so I gave my guitar to him. And then he went in the service and decided he was going to store my guitar in his attic. And I said, I don't think that's quite a good idea. So I brought it back and then it sat in the closet for a long time, and then I retired from CMS and decided that since it was the closet in my office, that maybe while I was doing other things, when I wasn't doing other things, I'd pick up the guitar and start playing again. So that was 2012. And I've kind of been playing ever since.
Well, thank you for that. And you raise a question I want to get back to later, but is there anybody on Zoom that has a question? No? Anybody in the room have a question?
How'd you become a UU? How did I become a UU? We had an organic farm. And one of the people who was working on the organic farm was familiar with this church and suggested that we come visit. And we visited and we visited and we visited. And about 2 or 3 years later, we finally became members. So that's how we found this church, this community.
Susan.
I could imagine a myriad of feelings with your dad's response to connecting with you as he was dying. I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there any more about that you would be willing to share?
Sure. I can talk about the reason for the split. He decided, my parents had a cabin in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And he decided at one point that he was going to live in the cabin while my mom was living in Cincinnati. And they didn't have mail service up there. We had taken the mailbox down and there was no mail service. But he was angry with me for not sending him a Father's Day card. And he wouldn't, he said, no, you're just making excuses. And I said, well, how can I do that? I don't have an address. And the other thing, everybody's thinking, well, why didn't you just call him? Dad didn't answer the phone.
Oh,
He never answered the phone, and he did not have a voicemail. So that was not a possibility. So the next time I saw him, I wished him a happy Father's Day, but that didn't go over so well. And ever since then, I was a persona non grata.
Okay, so you mentioned two things in your story. One, that you studied architecture, so I want to know what happened with that and what kind of career you had. You also mentioned CMS, which is Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools,
Mhm.
and I know you have a passion for education. So take one of those and run with it.
Okay, well, the architecture bit, was registered as an architect in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Practiced in a partnership, then practiced on my own, and went various places with that, including Charlotte.
So I knew an architect at another UU church, and what he focused on was designing restrooms in parks. What kind of architecture did you do?
Well,
Thank you very much.
in Chattanooga, I did a little bit of everything, but one of the things that I was responsible for was the basketball arena for UTC that they call the Roundhouse. I was responsible for doing all of the bid documents and everything for that. We had a team of about 12 people that worked 60 hours
Writing
a
spec.
week. Not just writing spec, but actually doing the drawings.
Yeah.
So yeah, did that on my own practice. I did a little bit of everything, including educational projects and residences. When I went to work at Anne Arundel County Public Schools, which is up in Annapolis, Maryland, I at one point decided that we were paying way too much for renovation projects. And since I was a licensed architect, we were going to do those projects in-house, which was not terribly exciting for the rest of the folks that had architectural firms, but I made my point, and we did, I think, 2 or 3 projects in-house and then went back. So that's the architecture story. The CMS story, I just finished doing 365 days of good news of local education. And that was everything from senior stories about seniors that were graduating to folks that were staff members who had gotten awards or.
So forgive my ignorance, is good news a thing, and how is it a thing? Is it a podcast or an online thing or a newsletter or
Okay, the
publication?
way it started was that there were about 2 or 3 news stories in various outlets that were not extremely negative, but they were negative. And the one that was positive, even midway through the story, turned negative. So I said, I'm sick and tired of this. I'm going to show people that there are good things happening in the local education situation. And so I said, okay, I'm going to post for 365 days. I'm going to post on my Facebook and my LinkedIn. And so I did 365 days of various news stories that were good news. I mean, there are an awful lot of CMS has 19,000 people working for them alone. So it's pretty easy to find, of that 365 of those folks who were good folks. And a lot of the folks that I work with, I worked there for 14 years.
And what did you do there?
I started in the in-house architectural department. I then went to facilities planning and real estate as the director, and then as executive director of planning, strategic planning for the district and superintendent's council.
That's great. Any
So-
other questions? Yes.
So this is wonderful. I'm fascinated by the fact that you're an architect and that you're so interested in music and I guess I want to ask you about the relationship between those, right? I mean, there's a way in which, architecture, you focus on creating this thing which is permanent, right? And lasting, whereas music is so ephemeral. But at the same time, what you're doing is in both cases, I guess somebody said once upon a time that architecture is music solidified, concretized, right? But what you're doing is you're creating an environment. Now, you started out telling us a story about these relationships, and then you're sort of healing that and addressing that with music. And so I wonder if you had something to say about the way in which either of these or both of these the creation of environments can help heal and make fruitful our relationships with others.
I think music draws us together and does build relationships. There's there is a presentation on how music draws people together by a young lady who from Melbourne, Australia. And she talks about how once people sing together, they begin to work together. And she has started, I think last I heard, 6 different community choirs about having people singing together and then working together as a group. As simple as finding people dates, as simple as finding people housing or transportation or whatever. These groups work together to do that and have a meal together as well as sing together. So yeah, from that standpoint, I think music really does build that kind of environment. Architecture, yes, builds structure, builds this kind of environment that people can use. It's interesting though, you find that once you finish the building and it's turned over to somebody else, it's not necessarily what you had planned for that building to be or do. There are probably a million stories about Frank Lloyd Wright, okay? But there's one in which S.C. Johnson calls him and says, I'm having a big party and the roof is leaking right in the middle of the living room. And so Wright hangs up the phone, goes over to their place, secures a bowl out of the kitchen and puts a bowl underneath. So that was that situation. In terms of education, what I'm doing right now is I'm a board member for the Epiphany School of Charlotte, and we serve students grades 3 through 8 that have Asperger's syndrome. Now, educators will tell you that social and emotional learning is the big deal right now. It's the hot topic, okay? But nobody's measuring that. At Epiphany, we're setting out to measure that and actually get down to these are the soft skills, okay? And they're important for our kids because our students don't have those soft skills. They don't. There are roughly 400 facial expressions, and these kids can't pick up those facial expressions. So we actually give them the tools to be able to pick that up another way. And so it's a very successful program, but a very small school. And as best we can tell, there were probably 250 kids with Asperger's at various levels in this area, in this 900,000 people. And we only serve 20 of them right now. So we're hoping to be able to be a resource to more students as we grow. But yeah, that's the education piece, that's the architecture piece, that's the music piece. And
It's all
you know, if I
pretty
have,
good, huh?
if I have one more thing to say, that is, you need to realize that you can change your decisions. You can, if the decision results in something that wasn't intended or that is not what you intended, don't be afraid to sit down and say, okay, I was wrong. Let's change this. Let's change the direction. Let's call it Aunt Betty, Aunt Hilda, you know. And
So thank you. You've shared your heart. You've shared your good news and set an example for that. And I know that we have just looked at a bit of the tip of the iceberg, which is what we all are to each other. So I encourage us all to keep sharing and about what we give our hearts to. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Feel free to stay and talk.